morning, everybody. I'm glad you're all excited. It's nice to get some laughs just before I come up on stage. It is a pleasure to meet you all, to spend some time with you this morning. My name is Charles Ross, and I'm a senior editor with the Economist Intelligence Unit. And what I do at the EIU is I focus on technology-related research. I spend a lot of my time thinking about how technology is impacting business and how companies need to respond to take advantage of the opportunities which exist and also manage the risk which is involved. So today, I'm going to talk about a couple of technologies, look at the disruption they're creating for business, and then we're going to talk about some companies and how they're responding to this disruption. So we're going to take a global view first. I grew up in Australia and then spent 10 years in the UK and have now been in Singapore for the last couple of years. So I have a good global perspective of what is happening. So we're going to start off talking about three technologies. I've got a video to show you which will show you how cloud computing, robotics, and 3D printing are disrupting industries. So if we could play our video, please.
Use of robotics is increasingly having an influence on emerging market supply chains in many ways, particularly in the automotive, chemical, and plastic industries. China alone was responsible for approximately 1/4 of the 227,000 industrial robots purchased worldwide in 2014. Companies in emerging markets, from the smallest of startups to state-run giants, are beginning to use cloud computing solutions to help track supply and demand throughout their businesses. For example, China's Alibaba, an e-commerce and cloud services provider, is helping Sinopec, Asia's biggest oil refiner, to build new cloud-based business systems that will help perform data analysis of the company's petrochemical production chain. Currently, 3D printing is being used by producers in emerging markets, particularly where labor costs are rising, to try and move up the value chain. Printers are making prototypes, manufacturing molds, and even wing parts and fuselage frames for airplanes.
So that gives you a few examples of what's happening in Asia and how technology is disrupting supply chains. Some good Asian examples up there as well. But let's look at the numbers. What does this mean economically? How much of an impact are these going to have? So on the slide here, we've got these are estimated economic impact of these technologies through to 2025, so 10 years from now. And these numbers are in trillions, not billions, not millions, but they're in trillions, and they're annual numbers. So top of the list, we've got mobile internet, which is in the range of $3.7 to $10.8 trillion. It's a huge amount. Now, this is probably not that surprising that it's the number one in this list, because mobile internet, which essentially is the smartphone device, is the window on the world for many, many consumers, many, many businesses in the way they operate. So that's the primary internet connection and will be the primary internet connection going forward through to 2025. So that's top of the list. Some of the other things we just showed in the video are on here as well. Cloud technology, 1.7 to 6.2, so going to have a big impact. And advanced robotics, 1.7 to 4.5. So still large numbers, not as big as that primary face mobile internet. Advanced robotics is an interesting one here in Asia. You may have noticed on the video that China is huge in robotics. In 2014, they purchased 1/4 of all of the world's robots. 1/4, that's a very large number. So clearly China, Asia more broadly, are embracing robotics and embracing technology. Another example in the video is around Sinopec. So say, for example, if we put all of these technologies together, you've got Sinopec who are using cloud computing to capture all of the data and information around their operations. If you take that information, which is then monitoring their supply chains and their systems, and if that feeds through, so they might flag an issue on one part of the system, which then triggers a 3D printing press or 3D printing plant to create a new part which needs to be replacing into that system. And then that triggers a robot that then takes that 3D part and puts it into place, fixes the problem. So everything working together. So the really exciting thing about technology is when it all works together and when you combine it and put it all together. That's where it's going to be huge. That's what's really exciting. And so focusing on the mobile internet bit for a little moment, the mobile internet, as I said, is the primary face of people interacting, and that's where the huge amount of value is going to come from. And that is what primarily is changing consumer behavior. It is changing the way people consume products and services. It is changing the way businesses are delivering their products and services. Got a good example of this. Justin mentioned this industry, the sharing economy, a little bit earlier. And within the sharing economy, the big poster child is Uber. And in Asia, it's Grab Taxi. Grab Taxi, big competitor to Uber, the sharing economy. And that has fundamentally changed the way changed consumer behavior. It has changed the way people book and manage their transport. It has changed the way people manage their car fleets. It changed the way taxi firms operate, and it has added massive amount of disruption because of this changing consumer behavior. There's an interesting number around Uber. They've been around for a little less than 5 years, and they now have a $40 billion valuation. Now that valuation is larger than the whole taxi industry. That makes you think. That's a huge amount of disruption. And that disruption, as Justin mentioned, is happening in a number of different places, a number of different industries around the world. So we've got technology, and we've got changing consumer behavior. Changing consumer behavior is not just limited, obviously, to things like Grab Taxi, Uber. It is happening all over the internet. Now, many of you have probably seen a slide like this before. It's just a quick snapshot. It tells us what is happening in an internet minute out there. These are big numbers. So I'm going to pull out a couple of examples here. Think of YouTube. You've all used YouTube. You've all watched videos on YouTube. Well, so have a lot of other people. 138,889. Large numbers. Hours of video watched on YouTube every single minute. There's 4.1 million searches on Google every single minute. And from a social aspect, Facebook, 3.3 million pieces of content shared every single minute. And these numbers are just going to explode. And the reason why they're going to explode is largely because of Asia. Now this slide here, this talks about social network penetration. These numbers are from January 2014. And we talk about the percentage of active internet users that are using social networks. Now on the left-hand side, we've got developed economies such as Canada, 82%. But right at the top here, we've got South Korea, Singapore, and Japan. Very high users of social network penetration, very high users of social networks. So really jumping on board in Asia here. If we look further down, however, this is where it's exciting as well, because the average sits at 39%. Just above that, China at 42%. So huge amounts of growth for China to get from 42% up to where the likes of South Korea and Japan are. But further down that, we've got Thailand, Indonesia, and India. This is a region with around 1.5 billion people. A huge amount of people, such low penetration. So many more people are going to be jumping on the internet, are going to be changing their consumer behaviors, going to create massive opportunity for companies. So huge growth here in Asia. So what's happening here from a business point of view? How are businesses thinking about this? So on one point, we've got new technologies. New technologies are changing the way products and services can be delivered and can be consumed. On the other side, we've got technology is putting the consumer at the center of this ecosystem. It's a consumer-centric society because customers now, with technology, with their mobile device, can interact with your company when they choose to. they can research when they choose to, they can purchase when they choose to. So they are at the center of this universe. So we've got a collision between new ways of doing things and new ways of consumers consuming. So to understand a little bit more about how businesses are thinking about this and reacting, I spoke to Telco earlier this year, who told me a little bit about his reaction to this and his strategy. So we're just going to play a quick video now.
I think what we need the telco of the future to be is an engine that can match the velocity with which we see services being built. So that means that the abstraction moves from just a network that happens to be a voice service to a network that can encompass all services. So this new abstraction of a world of things connected through mobile, attached to large, massive reasoning engines to extract data insights, all hosted in a cloud, becomes the new application abstraction that the telco of the future has to represent.
So what I think is interesting there is that he did not once talk about the traditional revenue streams of a telco. He doesn't talk about voice. He doesn't talk about selling data bundles. He doesn't talk about any of that. What he does talk about is all of these new technologies and how he's going to put them together and create value out of them. He talks about creating this digital engine which runs off cloud, which has a reasoning engine in it. And putting all this together, that's where Telstra see the value coming from. So that's one approach that a company is taking to leveraging the value out of this technology. Singtel, an example here, slightly closer to home, have a slightly different approach to things. So they're looking to leverage huge amounts of value out of the data and the information which this technology will create. Now, these mobile devices, which is, as I mentioned, is the primary window into the internet, they collect a lot of information. And Singtel are looking to use all of that information about customer behavior, about usage patterns, about location, to create data. So that's one strategy which Singtel is taking to get value out of this. An example from Northern Europe, Telenor have a different idea again. They think the way to compete here is to turn themselves into a technology company and away from being a telco. So I spoke to the CTO from Telenor a little bit earlier this year. He told me some interesting things, and these are things which telcos do not normally talk about. He talks about trying and failing and trying again when they're trying to create new products and services, new internet-type products and services. Now, this is not a traditional telco way of thinking, but it's the Telenor strategy of how we think we're going to be able to take value, take advantage of the opportunities which are being created here. So, same problem in telecoms, 3 different types of approaches to this. And this is what we're seeing across all industries, that companies are taking different approaches, they're trying and failing to see what works. Similar thing is happening in financial technology, in fintech, in your industry. And I know Justin talked about this earlier on, gave you some numbers around this, but this is global investment in fintech, and it is skyrocketing. It's gone up to around 12 billion in 2014. Large chunk of that, of course, as you'd expect in the US, but big numbers coming out of the rest of the world. I haven't got the 2015 number, but I'm sure that has just spiraled out of control because we are in a massive fintech crazy frenzy at the moment. So all this money piling into the industry, into fintech. But where's it going? What are they doing with it, and why are they spending so much money on fintech? Well, it's like telcos, because the whole supply chain, the whole value chain is being disrupted by small startups who are seeing opportunity to leverage fintech, leverage technology, and do things better. And so they're competing with you guys, competing with financial institutions on these different parts of that value chain. They're using data analytics, they're using cloud computing, they're using things like natural language, huge amount of disruption, and this is where all that investment is going. If we bring this closer to home, Justin showed you a slide like this for the global landscape. This is just Singapore. Busy, busy slide. These are the startups, the investments which are happening within just the Singapore fintech landscape. And it's covering the whole realm of the landscape, from payments and remittances through to personal finance, wealth, banking, investments, banking infrastructure, lending. If I were to update this slide on a monthly, say 6-monthly basis, it would just grow exponentially because there is so much activity here, because technology has created a huge amount of opportunity. But this is not just localized to Singapore. In Hong Kong also, massive fintech community being built as well. And governments are jumping on board with this as well. They're doing everything they can to encourage investment, fintech companies to come and operate here. Singapore in particular doing a huge amount in building incubators, encouraging accelerators to come here, building hubs, creating a good regulatory environment for investors to bring their money in and for entrepreneurs to set up and cash out. It's a very exciting time to be here. Singapore is really going to be the hub for this. They've got all the good pieces in place. So that's a really busy fintech landscape. That's what's disrupting the value chain. So what is interesting, we're talking about the startups, we're talking about technology, and I mentioned telcos before, how they're responding, but how are banks responding to this? And the answer is in many different ways. They're doing a lot of different things to respond, taking lots of small bets, which might be more akin to the Telenor idea, that lots of small bets, lots of small investments to try and stay in the game. They're doing things like acquiring fintech companies, or they're setting up their own venture funds to fund fintech companies. They're doing their own startup programs, or they're partnering with fintech companies, or they're even launching their own fintech subsidiaries. So this is all about, it's about innovation. And it's about either bringing the innovation in-house, it's about collaborating with outside parties, or it's about acquiring that innovation and getting it in so that they can stay in the game. And I talked about small bets. Many banks are doing a number of these. We've got Barclays in a couple of boxes there. We've got Santander in a couple of boxes there. Lots of small bets. That is how banks are reacting to this challenge. And they're putting a lot of effort into this, and they're putting a lot of focus on this and a lot of investment. Because I mentioned earlier, these technologies have massive predictive economic impact going through to 2025. Trillions of dollars of value which can be captured. We've got driving consumer behavior. We've got huge numbers of people coming online. Huge, massively bigger consumer base, which is changing that consumer behavior. And so banks are recognizing the huge amount of opportunity. They're reacting to it. So the question for you guys would be, how are you guys going to react and take advantage of the opportunities which are being created? Thank you very much for your time. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you. Thank you.